Is God's self-existence just a cold, abstract concept, or is it more than that? And how does God's self-existence impact our understanding of who God is and what He has done to save us? I'm Caleb Lyda, and this is 6-Minute Theology, where you can learn simplified theology for your everyday life. And today we're transitioning from our study on the Trinity into our study on the doctrines of God. And it is fitting that we begin this study by looking at God's self-existence, or the doctrine of God's aseity. This doctrine is foundational to our view of God and what God has done to save us. I'll explain why in this video, but first it's important that we define God's aseity. It comes from the Latin a se, meaning from himself, and the doctrine simply states that God is from himself. Some synonyms are independence or self-existence. God reveals himself as the one who is self-existent in Exodus 3:14 when he appears to Moses in the burning bush, and Moses asks, God, how should I describe you to people? What should I tell them that your name is? And here's what God says. God said to Moses, I am who I am. In other words, I simply am. I am being itself. I exist in and of myself. I need no other explanation. I have no further grounding or cause outside of myself. In fact, if you think about it, the very idea of God includes the idea of aseity. As Herman Bavink explains in his book Reformed Dogmatics, aseity is a fact more or less recognized by all humans in the very definition of God. If God is to be truly God, he must be sufficient unto himself. He depends on nothing. He needs nothing. Rather, all that exists depends on him. So, one of the primary ways to think of aseity as God's independence, and indeed, Scripture often teaches that God is independent from all of creation. We see this in Job 41:11, where God asks, who has first given to me that I should repay him? Whatever is under the whole heaven is mine. Similarly, Paul preaches in Acts chapter 17, the God who made the world and everything in it, being the Lord of heaven and earth, does not live in temples made by man, nor is he served by human hands as though he needed anything, since he himself gives to all mankind life and breath and everything. So Scripture is abundantly clear that God is completely independent, that he needs nothing. He has no cause outside of himself. But if we were to stop here, if we were to simply describe aseity as God's independence, I believe we would be falling short. In the words of theologian John Webster, aseity is not to be defined merely in negative terms as the mere absence of origination from or dependence upon eternal cause. So we shouldn't think of aseity merely in the negative aspect of independence or uncaused. We need to go deeper than that. We need to connect the doctrine of aseity with the doctrine of a Trinity, because the Trinity tells us who God is in and of himself. It describes what we mean by God's self-existence. And this leads to the crucial point that God's aseity is actually his triune life. John Webster explains this. He says, it is more fruitful to understand aseity in terms of fullness or personal relations. Aseity is life, God's life from and therefore in himself. This life is the relations of Father, Son, and Spirit. This description of aseity is beautiful because it prevents us from portraying God as an abstract philosophical concept, as something that's philosophically necessary, that's self-existent, that's uncaused, but rather it describes God as dynamic, as infinitely full of life and love, as one who is relational, a relational being in and of himself, as Father, Son, and Spirit. And this makes God not just, again, an idea or a concept, but someone who we can adore, someone we can praise, someone we can love and have a relationship with. Furthermore, God's aseity is also why he gives us life and salvation. Because God is life, He delights in giving life. And we understand this. We can understand that the Father sent his Son into the world not merely to get us a get out of hell free card, but to give us the very life that he has in and of himself, that he shares the fullness of his triune life with us, and that we can participate in that love between the Father and the Son and the Spirit from now and forever. Thank you for watching 6 Minute Theology, and stay tuned to learn about God's unchangeableness, which is another attribute that flows from his aseity.